Hello? Oh, you're muted.
Hi, Shannon.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. So we're just going to go on mute here while people attend, okay? And then
Okay.
I'll kick off at noon.
Okay, and quick question for you. I added your slides to mine, or are you just gonna control it from yours and then hand it over to me?
No, I want you to control the slides. That goes smoother that way. If you could
Okay,
do them all.
okay.
Okay, that's great. Okay, I'll see you in 10 minutes. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our live score webinar on Say It, Don't Display It, Confident Delivery and Smarter Visual Aids. I'm Bob Hogan, the webinar coordinator today and a business mentor here at Western Connecticut SCORE. I'm going to be your host today, and our presenter is Shannon Malkin Daniels. More on Shannon in just a minute, but just some brief information on SCORE. SCORE is a nonprofit national partner of the SBA with over 10,000 volunteers nationally, and locally here at Western Connecticut SCORE, we have about 130 volunteers with a wide range of industry process and subject matter expertise. And we offer three primary value-added services to small business owners. First of all, we offer free one-on-one counseling, and you can access that face-to-face, video, telephone, email, whatever works best for you. And secondly, we offer a wide range of educational webinars and workshops like the one today. And lastly, we offer extensive resources on our website, including a network of subject matter experts. Just some brief information today about today's event. We have set aside time for Q&A at the end of the presentation. And if you have a question, please use the Q&A button at any time during the presentation, and we'll take them all at the end of the presentation. It should be in the lower part of your screen. Our webinar will end sharply at 1 o'clock to respect your time. The session is being recorded, and a link to the recording will be available at westernconnecticut.score.org within the next day or so. It's now my pleasure to introduce our speaker today. Shannon Malkin Daniels is a TEDx speaker, author, professional storyteller, and authentic communication expert. Through her speaking, training, and facilitation, she helps leaders across the industries build confidence and connection by communicating from who they are, not who they think they're supposed to be. Shannon firmly believes every person has a story to tell and a message the world needs to hear, yet too many hold back, either out of fear or because they struggle to shape their ideas into clear, compelling message. She helps people overcome this by showing them how to refine their message and delivery in a way that strengthens trust, deepens relationships, and leads to more meaningful impact without losing themselves in the process. Shannon holds a master's degree in interpersonal communication from the University of Central Florida and has taught communication courses at Columbia University and Iona University. Her book, Water Yourself, a practical guide to weed out the bad, get more good, and live your dreams, has reached readers in 10 countries. Shannon, it's all yours.
Thanks, Bob, and thanks for that introduction. It's nice to be here with all of you today, and I'm excited to deliver this webinar to you. I know we've got quite a few signups, and normally I do things in a very interactive format, which is a little harder in a webinar format, but we're going to make the most of it. So I'm going to ask you to get involved in some ways throughout the course of this today. The focus of our talk today is say it, don't display it. And we are going to be talking about both visual aids as well as confidence so that you're not displaying all of your words and everything you're going to say on the slide, and you're not putting your nerves on display either. Let's start out. And I'm not going to introduce myself because Bob did such a great job of that. Thank you, Bob. Something's going on here. The screen froze. Give me just one moment. Technical difficulties. I'll go back to the top here. Give me one moment. Not sure why it skipped to the end there. All right, let's try this again. There we go. Part one, visual aids. Thanks for bearing with me with that. So part one, visual aids, we're going to dive into this first. And normally this is where I like to be really interactive with folks on this first slide. And so I'm not sure if you have the ability to chat with us, but if you do, I'd love for you to go over to the chat and throw in the chat what this image evokes for you. And if you can't throw that in the chat, then I want you to just think about it for a moment. So I'm going to take a look at the chat here. And all right, it looks like we can't do that. So just think about what this image evokes for you. Okay, we can get it. So vacation planning. Anything else? Thanks, Claire. Anyone else there? What does this image evoke for you? I've heard everything from vacation planning, being a partner. Okay. Thank you, Mohan. And I've heard everything from vacation planning to being bored at work to dreaming about what you're going to be doing this weekend. And the thing about visuals is that they evoke different feelings and different thoughts for everybody that looks at them. Calm and relaxing moment. Thank you, Paula. So as you can see, we've got already different answers about what this visual conveys for people. It's important to know why visual aids are so important. First of all, about 93% of all of the information that is processed by the brain is visual in nature. And then on top of that, the brain only takes about 13 milliseconds to process an image, not even a full second. 13 milliseconds. So our brain is working very fast to make sense of that image and bring something in. That's about 60,000 times faster than it takes our brain to process text. And why this is important in the context of what we're talking about is that most visual aids tend to be very text heavy. People love to put everything that they're going to say, all of their bullet points right up on the slide. If you're guilty of that, that's okay. That's why we're here today, to learn about it and to stop doing that. And the reason for that is because about 80% of what we remember is visual in nature. However, only about 10% of what we hear we remember, and only about 20% of what we read we remember. So we remember much more of what we see than what we hear. And when it comes to giving a presentation, it's your job to deliver the words, to convey that message to your audience. And it's your visuals job to reinforce your message and be quickly and easily processed by your audience. Now, if you are putting a bunch of text on your slides, something to think about. We can't read and listen effectively at the same time. And when people are given the choice of reading what's on your slide or listening to you, 9 times out of 10, they are going to read what's on the slide first and then tune back into you. The problem with this is by the time they've finished reading all of that text that's up on your slide and then come back to tuning into you, they're lost. They don't know where you are because they're picking up at the end of a sentence or in the middle of a thought, and they get confused. And so what do? They turn to their cell phone, they start scrolling, and they find other ways to entertain themselves until they can pick back up with you. So it's important to keep your visual aids visual in nature. Now, there are pros and cons to visual aids. The pros are that they can provide a visual framework for your message. They can take very complex ideas and they can help to simplify them. And as you saw, since we remember about 80% of what we see versus only about 10% of what we hear or read, it helps to improve information retention. Now, the cons are that they can be distracting. As you see here, I put an image right behind the cons side, and the black pen is distracting. It's in the way of that D. I did that by design and on purpose because it makes it harder to read. And so it can actually be distracting. And if you have too much on your slide, or if you're using too many animations or fly-ins, or it's too busy, people can get distracted. If your slides start to act up like they did on me at the very beginning of this, it can break your flow because you have to stop and get the technology back on track. And if you have technical difficulties, let's say your slides stop working altogether, the television goes out, something gets disconnected, and you're depending on those slides for your message, then it can cause other interruptions and other issues associated with it. Now, which comes first, the visual aid or the content? Which one do you create first? I just want you to throw one word in the chat, either visual or content. Do you sit down and write out your entire presentation first and then create visual aids? Or do you create your visuals and those become your content? I see content first. Go ahead and just quickly write that word, content, content, content. Content. A lot of content first, people. Loving this. All right. Great. That's good news. I love seeing that and reading that on the screen. The reason for that is because we should be doing our content first. The point of a visual aid is to support our content, not to be our content. Many of us were taught just to jump right in, create slides, and that's how you're building your presentation from scratch. The problem with that is you can end up with a disjointed presentation or visuals that don't make sense. Or when you go to actually deliver it, you'll get off track and you find yourself having to reorganize and fix things in your practice. And so it can be more time consuming to actually just go straight into creating your visual aids. So great job, everyone there, for leaning into content first. That's important. Let's talk a little bit about the different types of visual aids. We're all very familiar with slides, which is what I'm using here and what many of us use, but that's not the only type of visual aid available to us. It just happens to be the one we most commonly use. There are different visual aids such as handouts, props, maps, posters, and media in addition to the slides that we're so familiar with. I'll talk a little bit about each one now and how to utilize them. Posters are good if you're in a smaller room where people can actually see them. You don't want to use posters if you're up on a stage or in a large room where people are going to be far away from you. You want to use posters in a space where people can actually get close enough to see what's on them. And there's a nice little rule here, a rule of threes for posters. And I think this is funny. I didn't create this, but I came across it and I like it. You want to be able to, it can make a poster in a way that it can be read by three people who are standing 3 feet away after they've had 3 beers. And so if you can't read it after that, then you've got a problem. So the point here being that whatever you put on those posters, you don't want a lot of little text if you're using it as a visual aid. You want it big, bold, and easy to read. Keeping it simple, like this one on the right-hand side, which is the bookmark. He's clearly ironing down the edge of the page, doggy-earing it, and it's showing that a bookmark is a better way to mark where you are in your book. Props. Props are much more effective when you're doing certain demonstrations. I wouldn't, for example, teach how to do CPR using slides. It's not going to be as effective as being able to use a dummy and actually practice on it or show people how to use it. Cooking. Could I give you step-by-step instructions on a slide deck? Yes, but it's going to be much more effective if I actually do a cooking demonstration, or if I'm teaching you about different kitchen tools, being able to hold those up, show them to you, possibly even pass them around the room, let people hold them and get familiar with them. That's a more effective way of teaching those things. And if you're an architect, for example, using props such as models, 3D models are very effective when you're presenting on spatial things, and they are much more effective than a slide would be. Handouts. Something to know about handouts. If you're someone who likes to put a lot of information on your slide, that is better suited for a handout. I always tell people, slim down the information on your slide. If you really want to make sure your audience has the information available to them, do it in a handout and pass that out to your audience members. Now, when do you pass out the handouts? Handouts can be distracting as well if they're not used appropriately. What you don't want to do is pass out a handful of handouts or a big folder full of handouts ahead of time and have people reading through them and getting ahead of themselves with the presentation or getting confused or distracted. So if you're speaking at the beginning and they're reading through all the handouts and they miss the first 10 minutes of your presentation because they're reading through the handouts, that can be an issue as well. The best way to use a handout is to pass it out at the time that it's needed, at the time you want people referencing it or using it. Or in the case where you might not be able to do that if you don't have an assistant that can help you or the logistics aren't set up in a way that you can pass out the handouts at the appropriate time. One of the ways that I like to handle this is to put it in a folder and instruct people not to open the folder until they're told to do so. And then also not to read ahead in those items that are in the folder until the appropriate time. And I will tell you, you may say, yeah, that's not going to stop people from reading ahead. It usually does. People are pretty good at listening because they're engaged and they want to listen. They're there to learn from you or be inspired by you. Now, let's jump into our slides, and I'm going to give you some slide basics. You've heard me talk about not having too much text on your slides, the whole say it, don't display it part, but I'm going to give you some general rules of thumb when it comes to building slides. And we're going to focus on content, size, and images versus text. As far as contrast is concerned, you want to be careful with the colors that you choose. You'll notice that on the side where there's the blue and the white, you have dark and light together, and they're not in the same color family, which makes them very easy to see and be separated from each other. Whereas if you have purple and red together, those are colors that can blend together very easily. Red and green, they blend together very easily. And you also have to take into account which colors you're using because some people are colorblind. So some people can't even see certain colors on the spectrum. And if you're using colors that are too close to each other or dark on dark and light on light, it will be unreadable and not visible to a number of your audience members. So staying high contrast with a difference between light and dark and not being in the same color family is really going to help to create that differentiation for your audience. The next is size. Throw me a thumbs up if you've ever been in an audience where someone had a whole bunch of charts and graphs on a slide, or maybe just one chart or graph, and it was really complex and the information was really small, so you couldn't even read it. That is really frustrating for people. You want to use your charts and graphs on your slide in a way that they're big and easy to read. If you have certain numbers that you want to call attention to or certain aspects of that chart or graph that you want to draw attention to, you can bold them, make them a different color, make the text larger, whatever you need to do to draw attention to it. And then I hear this from financial clients quite often. Well, they need to be able to see all the numbers. Well, that goes in a handout. This is a time where it's appropriate to have the slide with the higher level, simpler chart and graph, and then the handout that lets them dig into the details of the numbers because they won't be able to see it up on the slide anyway. It will be too small and too complex. When it comes to text, you want to make sure you're using text that is large enough. And these are some general rules of thumb. If you're in a smaller room, you can use a slightly smaller font, but you never really want to get below, I would say, a 36 in your font. When you get below a 34 or a 36, it becomes very hard to read no matter how small your room is. I err on the side myself personally of generally in the 40s and above, and for my headlines in the 60s and above. Most of my headlines on my slides are between 75 and 85 in my font size. And the other thing that you want to make sure of is that you're using a font that's easy to read. If people are struggling to read it because it's too swirly, too fancy, it's got too many little ends and caps on it, that can be difficult as well. Now, text versus images. This is where I'm going to reinforce the less text is better. And I have an example here for you. On this slide, I have what I see most of the time, which is people putting long bullet points, mini bullet points, a lot of text on a slide. And here is an example of what I could do instead. It is not your slide's job to give your presentation for you. And it is likewise, your slide is not your speaker notes. Your slides are for your audience. They are not for you. They are there to reinforce your message and act as a visual aid. If you really need presenter notes, you can use the presenter notes function in PowerPoint or Canva or Google Slides or any of these other presentation tools, and then replace all that text that would be on an image where I have on the left-hand side over here with an image that reinforces the message that those bullet points would be saying for you. The bottom line here is less is more when it comes to slides and slide design. Now, how do you choose what's right for you? Which visual aid, whether it's a prop, a poster, a handout, slides, or something else altogether? Well, you want to consider your audience. Who are they? How good is their eyesight? You want to think about their age and different aspects and what's going to resonate with them. You also want to think about your venue. How big is the room? Are you up on a stage? What is the lighting like? If it's low lighting, some things like props or posters are going to be very hard to see. And what your objective is. As we talked about with the props, those can be a much better choice of a visual aid than slides. All right, if you have any questions, then go ahead and pop them in there. That's the section on slides. Now we're going to talk a little bit about confidence and how we can not display those nerves on stage. How many of you, just drop it in the chat for me, get nervous? Are you nervous speakers? You get public speaking anxiety when someone tells you you've got to do a presentation, you want to run the other way? Or you turn down presentations because the fear is just gripping you at the prospect of even speaking to someone. So go ahead and toss in the chat there. How many of you have a fear of public speaking? Never. I like it, Lloyd. Got that confidence. Anyone else? I have fear. All right, Bennett, that's all right. Sometimes, yep. And some people do get it sometimes. So go ahead and keep dropping that in the chat. And as you do, I'm going to share with you that the fear of public speaking has an actual name. It's called glossophobia, and it affects nearly 3/4 of the population. In fact, it is the #1 fear in the world, and it's ranked above death. Jerry Seinfeld even has a joke about this where he says, "So you're telling me that when I go to a funeral, more people would rather be in the casket than giving the eulogy?" And the answer is yes. Now, I think if rubber met the road and you had to decide speak or die, you would choose to speak. But some people have told me, no, 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 I'd rather die. So if you are someone that does have nerves or does have fear around public speaking, then know that you are not alone. You are in company with most of the world on this. And Amy, yes, we did talk about examples of props and how they're used. For example, CPR, using a dummy, a cooking demonstration, having an actual getting up into a kitchen and actually cooking, a 3D model for architects or something like that. And I'm happy to talk about that a little bit more in depth offline. All right, so let's talk about, let's come back over here to glossophobia and talk about what it really is. At the end of the day, the fear of public speaking isn't actually the fear of speaking. Most people are not, we talk all day, every day. We talk one-on-one, we talk in small groups, we go to dinner with friends and have conversations. So we're not really afraid of speaking. What we're afraid of is the fear of judgment, the fear of failure, the fear of looking stupid, the fear of messing up, all of those kind of things. So it's more about our own limiting beliefs and fears that we have inside associated with the act of public speaking than it is the speaking itself. Now I'm going to share with you some tips on how you can step into confidence and be a more confident speaker and help to overcome those nerves and anxiety. I have what I call my 3 Ps to speak success: prepare, practice, and power up. And these will help you turn that big, scary speaking monster into little friendly, happy monsters. And they can be friendly. So we're going to learn that. But the prepare piece is a much more in-depth conversation that we could do an entire webinar on itself. So we're not going to get into that today. What we are going to focus on are some practice techniques as well as some power-up techniques. First, practice. For #1, first and foremost, you want to practice out loud. How many of you can just throw a hand in the, or a thumbs up in the chat, actually practice your presentations out loud before you deliver them? Throw me some thumbs up over in that chat there. And I'm just looking, sometimes people get nervous. I get nervous if content isn't on point, but my audience doesn't see it. Yes, but usually I'm nervous what their questions are going to be and don't have them and look unprofessional. Okay, we can talk about that a little bit as well. So out loud and in a mirror. Good, Lloyd. Does anybody else practice out loud? While you're throwing your answers in there, it's very important to practice out loud. If you aren't practicing out loud, then you are in essence doing your dress rehearsal in front of your audience. Actors and actresses, people in plays, they don't get on stage without doing dress rehearsals, right? Why would you get in front of an audience without practicing your presentation out loud? And this is really important because we read, write, and think much differently than we speak. I have clients tell me all the time, yeah, but Shannon, I write like I speak. And I say, well, you may write conversationally, but you do not write how you speak. And there's always a push and pull with that conversation. And then I have them practice it, and they'll go to reading their script written out how they speak and still be stumbling over the words that are written on the piece of paper. And the reason for that is because that in that transition between brain and mouth, your mouth is not wanting to form those words or form those words in the order that they were written on the piece of paper. So I tell people not to get hung up on a script and also to practice out loud. When you practice out loud, it gives you the opportunity to work out any little kinks that you may have ahead of time, to make sure that you're not tripping over words. And it gets you more familiar with your content when you practice out loud, so that on the day of, you're not having to think so hard. Your brain's not having to process that information as hard to be able to deliver it. So practicing out loud, if you're standing when you're delivering, stand and practice out loud. Lloyd, I love that you stand and practice in front of a mirror. That's great. Do that. The next thing you can do is record yourself. If you're really worried about your delivery, how you sound, if you have too many filler words, anything along those lines, then record yourself and watch it back. Now, keep in mind that we are our own worst critics, so try not to be too critical of yourself, but record yourself. See how you did, make notes, and work on improving the next time you practice. And I promise you, the more you do this, the more it will reduce your anxiety and improve your overall delivery skills. The next thing is to time yourself. This is a step that gets skipped really often. And it's important that if you have a time constrained presentation, which most presentations are 30 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour, whatever it is, time it to make sure you can fit all of the content in. I'm sure we've all been in those presentations or have even delivered those presentations where we didn't make sure our timing was correct. And so once we got to the end, we had to skip, or rush through the rest of the content or skip an entire piece altogether. So it's important when you're practicing to time yourself. And if it's too long, slim some things back. The next thing is to pace yourself. As you're practicing, especially if you're a nervous speaker, practice your pacing. Speak slower than you feel you need to speak. When you're a nervous speaker and our anxiety starts going through the roof and our heart starts beating and the cortisol floods our body, we start to speak really fast. That, and we just want to get it over with and get off the stage as quickly as possible or out from in front of the room as quickly as possible. If you work on your pacing and practice, it's going to improve your pacing in delivery. So practice makes presentation. Just keep that in mind. The other thing you can do is have a mock audience. Have friends, family members, colleagues, whoever it is, sit and listen to your practice. My husband can tell you I make him sit through my presentations all the time and listen to me and give me feedback. Getting feedback from a third party that will be honest with you is a really helpful way to ensure that you start to feel more confident and more prepared and more ready for presentation day. And find someone that will be honest and give you truthful feedback that's going to be really helpful as you move through that practice. The next thing is to do not memorize. A lot of people love to memorize because they say, well, I'll get nervous if I don't memorize it, if I don't have it down, or I'll forget a word, or I'll forget a sentence. That's okay. The purpose of presenting is to share your message with your audience. And it's about connection, not perfection. Nobody's going to know if you skipped a specific word or a sentence or even an entire paragraph or section unless you tell them that you did that. What you want to do is practice in a way that you're not memorizing every single word, but you're memorizing the key points of your presentation and what order they come in. So that if you get off track, if you get lost, if you stumble, if someone interrupts you mid-presentation, you can jump right back in, pick up at that next point in your speech, and continue talking. Because at the end of the day, the person creating the presentation most of the time is you. And so you know what you're talking about. You know your content. You're the one that put the presentation together in the first place. So memorization is not necessary. And presentations are much better received when they don't come across as robotic. And memorization can make you sound robotic at the end of the day. And in fact, it's shown that memorization or reading your presentation off of a script actually increases anxiety. And the reason for that is if you get off track, it is much harder to get back on track, to find that exact next word or find exactly where you were on the piece of paper. And then that causes panic and anxiety to go through the roof. So I highly recommend you do not memorize, but think about your speech as if it's a roadmap, as if you're giving directions to someone from start to beginning. And you have these landmarks, these main points throughout your speech. And just remember what those landmarks are and the order they should be delivered in and express it that way. Another way to practice is something that I call segment stacking. And how this works is basically, let's say you have an introduction, three main points, and a conclusion. You're going to practice your introduction over and over until you feel comfortable with it. Again, this is not about memorizing it or saying it exactly the same every single time. This is more about getting yourself comfortable with it. And it may come out a little bit different each time you say it, but as long as the essence of that introduction is there, you're on track and you're not stumbling over it. Once you have that introduction down, you're good. Then what you want to do is add that first main point and all the content related to it to your introduction. And you'll practice your introduction and the first main point together over and over again until you feel comfortable with those first two pieces. Then you add the second point, the third point, and so on until you've gotten all the way to the end of your speech and are feeling comfortable with the entire thing. This does a couple of things. One, it lets you work out kinks section by section instead of all at one time and stopping and rebooting and starting over from the beginning. Second, what it does is it lets you get the beginning of your talk down cold. You start to feel really confident and really connected to it so that no matter what, you can come out of the gate feeling really strong. And I found that when people can get through that first 2 or 3 minutes in a really solid and strong way, then they settle in and they're moving on from there. And finally, be kind to yourself. Don't beat yourself up. Understand that mistakes are going to happen. Again, it's about connection, not perfection at the end of the day. So as you're practicing, don't beat yourself up if you mess up. Just keep rolling with it. All right. If you have any questions about that, drop them into the Q&A here. And now I'm going to share some of my power-up techniques for you. The first of those power-up techniques is, well, let me first go back a bit here. Just like Popeye has his spinach, that if you are older like me and you remember Popeye, he ate his spinach and he got strong and he could fight the bad guy and save olive oil. We have our power-up techniques to help us be more confident and strong when we're going into a presentation. The first is a power pose. Have any of you heard of the power pose and Amy Cuddy? If so, I want you to just drop a thumbs up there in the chat and let me know, yeah. And if you have tried power posing, how has it worked for you? I would love to hear about that. So power posing there was a famous TED Talk by Amy Cuddy where she talked about how in the wild she saw the animals when they opened themselves up, they were getting ready for confrontation, and it boosted their confidence, made them feel ready for whatever it was that was coming their way. She started to wonder if that was the same for humans. So she did some studies on if humans open themselves up in these power pose, does that help them to feel more confident? And what she found is that by power posing for a couple of minutes, you raise your testosterone, the power dominance hormone, and you lower your cortisol and those stress hormones around it. So power posing can really help you to feel more confident for just a couple of minutes. Now, there have been other talks since, and there's been repeat of this research, and some have been able to confirm it, others have not. And so there's a lot of controversy around whether it works or not. But what I tell people all the time, if it works for you, good, do it. If it doesn't work for you, let it go. This is just one of many techniques you can use. Another is to exercise before your presentation. We have all this pent up extra energy when we get anxious and everything's flowing, right? So if you do exercise, you don't want to blow yourself out and go out and run 20 miles before you give a presentation, but doing some light exercise to burn off some of that excess energy is just going to help you to feel more grounded before you go into your presentation. If you are a nervous speaker and you get anxious, you want to avoid caffeine before your presentation. Now, I know we all love our cup of coffee or tea or whatever it is in the morning. Some of us are soda drinkers. If you drink caffeine, then you want to avoid it right before your presentation, because drinking caffeine is like pouring fuel on the fire. Anxiety increases our heart rate. It can make us shaky. It can make our voice waver. Caffeine has very similar effects on the body. And so when we put those together, it's just compounding all of those effects that anxiety has on us. If you're someone that gets a headache, if you don't drink coffee, then have just a little bit to stave off that headache and save the coffee or tea or whatever it is for after the presentation. Next is to get at least 7 hours of sleep. We need at least 7 hours of sleep for our hypothalamus, that decision-making center of our brain, to work properly. So if you're not getting enough sleep, and this can't just be the night before, this needs to be several nights leading up to your presentation. If we're not getting enough sleep, our brain is not functioning, it's not working on all cylinders like it should be. And so if it's affecting the decisions we're making, then it's also going to be affecting the way in which we can recall and present. Another tip you can use is to eat healthy foods. When we're thinking about healthy foods, think about things that grow up and towards the sun. Things that grow up and towards the sun tend to be energizing. So they give us energy, they make us feel lighter and happier. Whereas if we're eating things that grow down and into the ground, or heavy fried foods and heavy carbohydrates, it's going to pull us down and make us feel more tired and less energetic, and it's going to make it harder for us to think clearly. Also, you don't want to eat a big meal right before you present, because what's going to happen? All the blood's going to rush from your brain to your stomach to work on digestion, and it's not going to be helping you to focus on your presentation. If we have any meditators out there, you can also meditate. This is going to slow your nervous system and just calm everything down for you. And then there's breathing. So how many of you have heard of something called box breathing? If you have, you can just throw a thumbs up in the chat for me. What box breathing is think about a box, a square with 4 sides. And what you'll do is you're going to breathe in through your nose for a count of 4. You'll hold your breath for a count of 4. You'll breathe out through your mouth for a count of 4, and you'll hold your breath for a count of 4. And what this does is it slows your nervous system, it calms everything down. If you do this for a couple of minutes, a minute or two right before you present, it's going to help you feel more grounded, more calm, so that you can go into your presentation feeling more confident and ready and not all amped up. The other thing you want to do is visualize success. You can use positive visualizations. Many people, what they'll do is they'll say, oh my gosh, I'm going to mess up. I'm going to freeze. I'm going to lose my words. I'm going to look stupid up there. My throat's going to tighten up. Well, if those are the things that we're focusing on, those are the things that we're going to start to manifest. And we don't have time to get into all of it today, but there is actual neuroscience behind all of that. Instead, I want you to visualize the outcome that you want, the outcome that you're seeking. And what'll happen is if you visualize that, you'll be more focused on that. So use all of your senses, use your sight, your sound, your taste, your smell. Put yourself in that room where you'll be and see yourself just getting up there and nailing it. Positive affirmations are another way that you can help to shift your mindset. Again, we don't have time to get into all the neuroscience behind this, but you really can speak things into existence. We have these neurological firing patterns in our brain, and our most frequently thought emotions, feelings, etc., are the ones that are going to fire automatically. So if you're used to thinking, I'm going to be anxious, I'm going to be nervous, I'm going to be sweaty, I'm going to feel stupid, then that's what your brain is automatically going to go to. Whereas you can start to replace those negative thoughts with positive ones by doing positive affirmations. So instead, anytime one of those doubts or start to creep in, start to replace it with what you want to be thinking or feeling. So instead of I'm a terrible speaker, say I'm a fantastic speaker. And it takes 3 to 5 positive thoughts and feelings to offset just one negative one. So you need to say these positive affirmations 3 to 5 times. And it's better if you say them out loud, because when we think something, about 100 neurons fires in our brain. But when we say something, when we speak it, about 10,000 neurons fire in our brain. So what we're saying out loud really does affect our brain and our brain chemistry. So find those negative thoughts and feelings, replace them with positive ones, and it takes time and repetition to start to change those firing patterns. Here are just a few that you can use of ones that I have had people use and find success with. My message matters and deserves to be heard. I speak with clarity, purpose, and confidence. I make a meaningful impact when I use my voice, and I am a powerful communicator. So find which ones are important for you. Write down those positive affirmations and use them daily until you start to shift the way you're thinking about yourself in your presentations. All right, with that, I will hand it over for questions. Is anybody okay? I've got another question there. I always have cold water near me while presenting. Is it true that drinking warm water, yuck, is better than cold water while speaking? Well, although I haven't heard that specifically, what I will say is that warm water is better on the throat. That's why when you have a sore throat or something, drinking hot tea, it can really help to calm things down and open things up in there. I also drink cold water when I'm speaking. And so if the cold water is working for you and you're not getting a constricted throat, I don't see any issue with you having to, drink cold water while you're there. Any other
Shannon,
questions?
maybe you could also take the one from Amy about what's an example of a prop and how it's used.
Yeah, I actually answered that a little bit earlier,
Yeah.
but I'll just circle back on that. So a prop would be like me holding up a water bottle and talking about this water bottle and how I would use it and how I would drink from it and how much water I drink on a daily basis, as opposed to having that on a slide.
Okay, that's great. Any more questions? We will take as many as we can up until the top of the hour here.
Don't be shy.
Yeah, just give people a minute here. Think they're shy, Shannon.
That or I just did such a good job. Nobody has any questions for me. I know there's certain things I didn't cover either. So if there's anything that I wasn't able to cover that you had a question about coming into this,
There's one here from Mohan. Can I put a question on my t-shirt?
uh, well, I can't see your t-shirt, so
Here's one, another one from Amy. What about being nervous about questions at the end, and not being able to answer and look unprofessional?
yeah, so there's a couple of techniques for that, and I cover this a lot when I talk about impromptu speaking. Before you go into any presentation, it's always important to know who your audience is, what your purpose is, why you're speaking in the first place, what your objective is, what you want people to think, feel, or do differently as a result of hearing you speak, and what your core message is. Once you have those things in place, you can formulate your talk. And then also, you're going to use those things, especially your audience information, to try to think about what type of questions may come up as a result of me sharing this information. And write those questions down. And as part of your preparation, start writing out some bullet points on how you might tackle those questions. So you're kind of thinking ahead of what questions you might get asked and preparing some answers for them. Now, if you get a question that's out of left field and you don't know how to answer it, it's okay to say, that's a great question. I don't know the answer to that, but I'd be happy to get back to you with an answer to that question. And it also gives you another opportunity, which is an opportunity to get the person's contact information and follow up with them. And so don't fake it while you're up there. So don't make it up because people much more appreciate you saying, I don't know, let me find out and get back to you.
That's great, very helpful. There is one from Jennifer in the chat. Jennifer's asking, do you have any suggestions on finding free images for presentations other than through Canva?
Free images are tough these days. You're getting charged for images pretty much everywhere. I've used different image galleries such as Shutterstock 123RF tends to be very affordable. But for me, I pay for the pro version of Canva because it unlocks a lot of images. And Canva has really high quality images and video where you don't have to go looking elsewhere for them. But free images, that's tough because if you just pull off the internet, one thing you can do, you can go to Google and in the drop down in the search, there's a way to search for images that are royalty free and can be used without additional cost. And so if you do find an image on Google that you can use royalty free, you can use that one.
I noticed that Paula also added Creative Fabrica is great, but there is a subscription cost. Not sure if you're familiar with that.
Yeah. And you want to be careful with screenshots or just using something you find in Google or Google search because there's usage rights. And if you use things that you don't have the rights to, you could be fined for that.
Back to the Q&A, Amy had a follow-up. She said, I noticed you stop at different segments throughout your presentation to prompt people to add questions to the chat. Is that a technique you're doing intentionally?
Yes, it's especially hard when doing a webinar and I can't see your faces. And some of you I know on this call, and you're familiar with the fact that I make my presentations and workshops very interactive. I like to be very hands-on with things. And so it's hard for people's attention spans. We start to lose attention at about a 10-minute mark. And so I never go more than 15-ish minutes without getting the audience engaged in some way, shape, or form. And when you're in virtual, using the chat or just throw a thumbs up or something like that is a great way to keep that interaction and engagement up.
We still have time left if people have any more questions for Shannon. There was a lot there in that presentation. I'm sure there's some questions out there.
Yeah. Good. I'm glad that's helpful. Haven't used this site, Pixabay. Yes, Pixabay. I'm not sure if it's still free, but I think it was free at one point in time, and their images can be decent, but they're not the greatest images either. Um, Bob, if it's okay, I do have, before people start to hop off, I do have an offer for folks as well. May I share this?
Sure.
So I have a 4 hour real time how to build slides workshop coming up. And it's where you're going to come in, we're going to dive a little deeper on building slide decks, how to use Canva to build a slide deck. We're going to workshop them in real time. And folks are going to come in with their computers, and I'm going to help you one-on-one. I'm limiting this to 15 people, so we make sure we get that hands-on time. And for attending today, if you're interested in this, you can scan that QR code or reach out to me. You can get $50 off through the end of the month by using the coupon code SCORE.
Okay. All right, so people, you can take advantage of that. Here's one last one from Paula. When you're teaching a live session, not a webinar, when many or most of us are off camera, do you have a technique for managing yourself when you can't see them? And I think you've covered a little bit of that, but maybe you can expand on it for Paula.
Yeah, it's always difficult. Like in this case, I can't see any of you in particular, and I can see the chat though. So I'm using the chat in this case. There have been instances when I'm doing a hybrid presentation. For example, when I was presenting at MasterCard, I was at Purchase New York, and Purchase New York at their offices there had about 100 people in the room, but then they were live streaming it to Dubai and New York City and St. Louis and several other locations. And I couldn't see any of the people that were on the other side of that camera because the camera was aimed at me, but I couldn't see any of them. And I actually didn't even have access to the chat or anything that was coming in either. Someone else was controlling that. So it's about making sure that you are acknowledging the people that are listening and are on the other side of the camera, making them feel like they're seen and heard, even if they're not actually seen and heard, and making them part of the conversation. You can pause and do little activities, have them think about something, have them jot some notes, whatever it may be. But it's about making sure you're not just addressing either the people in the room or the people you can see on camera, but making sure everybody feels seen and heard and part of the conversation.
That's great. Well, I don't think there's any more questions. So just as a reminder to everyone, this session has been recorded and any materials will be available within the next couple of days on our website, westernconnecticut.score.org. And when you're on our website, you can also check for information on upcoming webinars. And again, as I mentioned at the beginning, if you want free individual counseling, you can just click on the link that you see there on the screen and just use the request a mentor link, and we're available by phone, email, video, whatever works best for you. We'd also really appreciate if you could fill out your evaluations. That'll be automatically sent at the end of the webinar. And on behalf of SCORE, I'd like to thank everyone for attending today's live webinar. And in closing, a special big thank you to you, Shannon, for your presentation today.
Thank you for having
Thanks
me.
very
Thanks
much, everybody.
everybody for tuning in.
Okay, thank you.
Bye.